Ilia Topuria's brother, Aleksandre Topuria, has officially joined the UFC roster, raising the big question, does he have what it takes to follow in Ilia's footsteps? With a 100% finishing rate and one of the UFC's most dangerous featherweights as his training partner, Aleksandre could be the next serious contender at 145 pounds. If he rises to the top alongside Ilia, we might be witnessing the birth of MMA's version of the Klitschko brothers, who dominated the boxing world together for over half a decade. But the Topuria brothers aren't the first, nor will they be the last, to shake up the sport as a sibling duo. Let's take a deep dive into who Aleksandre Topuria is, whether he can replicate his brother's success, and the 10 greatest brother duos in MMA history. Besides Islam Makhachev, Ilia Topuria might be the most dominant champion in the UFC today. His arrival in the UFC was like dropping a piranha into a fish tank. He went on an absolute tear, dismantling everyone put in front of him. Since making his promotional debut in 2020, the hard-hitting Georgian has gone 8-0 in the UFC, with 6 brutal finishes. What he accomplished in just 1 calendar year is something rarely seen. In 2024, he seized the UFC featherweight title by brutally knocking out one of the division's greatest, Alexander Volkanovski. To put that in perspective, Volk had never lost at featherweight in the UFC, yet Ilia made it look effortless. And if that wasn't enough, he took on another legend of the division, Max Holloway. While Holloway's boxing has puzzled countless opponents, Ilia cracked the code, breaking through Max's defenses and sending him straight into oblivion. His brother Alexandre, on the other hand, has yet to be tested in the UFC. With 5 wins, 5 finishes, and barely hitting his prime at 29, he could be the next Topuria to reign supreme. A versatile finisher, Alexandre has won 3 fights by knockout and 2 by submission, with none of his opponents surviving to hear the final bell. Can he continue his dominant run in the UFC? That remains to be seen. Let's get one thing straight. The Diaz brothers were never the best or most technically skilled fighters, but there will never be another duo like them in MMA history. Why, you ask? There are plenty of reasons. They weren't your typical fighters who bowed in respect or shook hands behind the scenes. In fact, if you were a fellow UFC competitor and happened to run into them in a parking lot or hotel, there was a good chance they'd jump you and beat you senseless. Nick Diaz made his mark by winning the inaugural Strikeforce Welterweight Championship, brutalizing Mariusz Zaromskis to a first-round TKO.
Down goes Zaromskis as it's the Strikeforce Welterweight Champion.
From there, he showcased his grappling skills with a textbook armbar against Hayato Sakurai.
Oh, the armbar! The armbar! It's trouble! It's good night, Irene!
And defended his belt against KJ Noons. But what came next would be one of the biggest highlights of his career. Nick faced Evangelista Santos and snatched his arm for a second-round submission victory.
It's over! Diaz retains the Strikeforce welterweight title!
But it didn't end there. He climbed the cage and flipped off Santos' wife, none other than Chris Cyborg. In his next fight, Nick outboxed Paul Daly for a first-round TKO, making the win even more impressive by challenging Daly in his own realm, the striking department. Little did anyone know that his younger brother Nate would go on to surpass him in superstardom. Nate's popularity exploded when he endured Conor McGregor's onslaught before submitting him in the second round. The last time we saw him in the octagon, he put on another airtight submission victory against Tony Ferguson. Beyond McGregor, some of his most memorable wins came against Michael Johnson, Gray Maynard, Jim Miller, and Donald Cerrone. And while the Diaz brothers never won an undisputed UFC title, they'll always be remembered as the wildest, most dangerous duo to ever set foot in the octagon. The Miller brothers had one thing in common. They were both submission wizards, capable of locking in finishes from any position to seal the deal before the final horn. Jim Miller is the more well-known of the two. largely because he continued fighting for a decade after his older brother's retirement. During that time, he broke several UFC records, including most fights, most total wins, and most victories in the lightweight division. Some of his most memorable wins came against Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Joe Lozon, Takaroni Gomi, and even a future UFC champion, Charles Oliveira. His older brother Dan had his own respectable career, but retired in 2015. By the time he hung up the gloves, he had secured 14 wins, 9 by submission and 1 by knockout. The name Patricio Pitbull is synonymous with Bellator. Arguably the organization's biggest star, he has been their long-reigning champion and one of the most dominant fighters in its history. Since making his Bellator debut in 2010, Patricio has fought in more title bouts than anyone else. His first championship victory came in 2014, when he edged out Pat Curran on the judges' scoreboards to claim the gold. He defended the belt twice before losing it, but on April 12, 2017, he reclaimed the throne with a textbook guillotine choke against Daniel Straus.
There he goes for it. This is how he beat Henry Corrales. He got it!
From there, he went on a tear, streamrolling through 6 opponents with bad intentions before losing the title to AJ McKee. But in true Pitbull fashion, he avenged the loss in their rematch, recapturing the belt and later defending it against Adam Boric. Patricio is known for his wars with future UFC title contender Michael Chandler, as well as for blending ferocious knockouts with slick submissions. His brother Patricky Pitbull has also built an impressive career. From 2017 to 2019, he went on a 7-fight win streak, before falling short in the 2019 Ryzen Lightweight Grand Prix final against Tofik Musayev. However, Patricky bounced back in 2021, defeating Peter Queally to claim the Bellator Lightweight World Championship.
Patricky Pitbull! That's 11 years! And now the new Bellator Lightweight World Champion!
The Shamrock brothers were among the UFC's earliest pioneers, carrying the organization on their backs during its darkest days. When discussing UFC OGs, Ken Shamrock's name is a must. He was one of the few participants in the historic UFC 1 event, helping lay the foundation for the sport. On August 10, 2001, Ken won the WMMAA Heavyweight Championship by submitting Sam Atkins in the first round. By that time, he had built an impressive record of 25 wins with only 6 losses. Some of his most memorable battles include his wars with Royce Gracie and his rivalry with Kimo Leopoldi, while his most notable victories came against legends like Bas Rutten and Dan Severn. His adopted brother, Frank Shamrock, arguably had an even more impressive MMA career. Frank won the UFC light heavyweight title on December 21, 1997, by defeating Kevin Jackson. From there, he knocked out Igor Zinoviev and submitted Jeremy Horn and John Lober. But one of his greatest performances came in 1999 against Tito Ortiz, a fight later recognized as Fight of the Year. Frank TKO'd Tito in the 4th round before vacating the title on November 24, 1999. For those who've watched Naruto, you're probably familiar with the Uchiha clan. In MMA, the Nurmagomedovs are essentially the Uchiha clan. Following in the footsteps of their legendary cousin Habib, Usman and Umar have been dominating their respective paths toward title opportunities, and it's tough to say which of the two is better. Unlike many of their fellow Dagestanis, Usman and Umar are primarily strikers, though they incorporate wrestling when needed. What makes them so dangerous is their perfect blend of striking and wrestling, allowing them to take the fight wherever their opponents want to go. Umar went on an impressive 18-fight unbeaten streak, including a dominant performance over Corey Sandhagen, before challenging Merab Dvalishvili for the undisputed title. Though Merab edged Umar by a very close decision victory, it was a close fight that could have gone either way. His younger brother, Usman, remains undefeated with a perfect 19-0 record. He claimed the Bellator Lightweight Championship by defeating Patricky Pitbull, and his most recent victory came against Ireland's rising star, Paul Hughes. When it comes to ninja kicks and jaw-dropping knockouts, nobody does it better than Anthony Pettis. His nickname Showtime isn't something you can ask for, you have to earn it. And who deserves it more than the man who delivered one of the most iconic moments in MMA history? In his first fight against Benson Henderson, Pettis leaped off the cage and landed a perfectly timed kick to Benson's face, a move so spectacular it remains a staple in every major MMA highlight reel and has yet to be replicated. Pettis went on to capture UFC gold by submitting Benson Henderson in the first round, becoming the first fighter ever to tap him out. But his list of achievements didn't stop there. He also became the first fighter to knock out striking maestro Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Even before winning the UFC title, Showtime had already sent Joe Lauzon and Donald Cerrone into another dimension with his devastating kicks. And while Charles Oliveira is widely regarded as the greatest submission artist in MMA history, Pettis managed to beat Do Bronx at his own game, locking in a guillotine choke to secure the victory. His younger brother Sergio may not have reached the same heights in the UFC, but he found his own success in Bellator. On May 7, 2021, he became the Bellator Bantamweight World Champion by defeating Juan Archuleta. Over the next 2 years, Sergio continued to impress, delivering a stunning spinning backfist knockout against Kyoji Horiguchi and later defeating Bellator legend Patricio Pitbull in a dominant performance. If someone asks you to name the most legendary high-kick knockout in UFC history, most fans would point to Leon Edwards' last-minute KO against the then undisputed welterweight king Kamaru Usman. For years, Usman was seen as untouchable until Leon shattered that aura of invincibility and laid the blueprint for defeating the welterweight great. After claiming the belt, Edwards proved it wasn't a fluke by dominating Usman in their rematch and successfully defending his title against Colby Covington. His younger brother Fabian gained public attention after brutalizing UFC legend Lyoto Machida with vicious elbows and outclassing MMA royalty Gegard Mousasi in a one-sided unanimous decision victory. Fabian has fought for the Bellator middleweight title twice, but fell short against Johnny Eblen. However, with his talent and determination, his championship journey may not be over just yet. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira is one of the biggest MMA legends before the UFC era, and one of the first to successfully implement Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to defeat fellow heavyweights with ease. The Brazilian fighter introduced the gentle art of Jiu-Jitsu to competitors like Valentine Overeem, Gary Goodridge, and Mark Coleman, before claiming the Pride Heavyweight Championship against Heath Herring in 2004. Nogueira became a two-time Pride Heavyweight Champion by surviving a brutal first round against the legendary Mirko Cro Cop before submitting him in the second. Big Nog has been part of legendary battles with the likes of Fedor Emelianenko and has defeated other MMA icons such as Mark Coleman, Dan Henderson, Sammy Schlitt, Josh Barnett, and Fabricio Verdum. He also won the UFC Interim Heavyweight Championship by beating Tim Silva and delivered one of the greatest fights in UFC history against Randy Couture. His younger brother, Rogerio Nogueira, never won a Pride or UFC title. However, his spectacular performances, including victories over Alistair Overeem twice, Dan Henderson, Tito Ortiz, and Rashad Evans, have more than earned him a spot in MMA history. Fedor Emelianenko is your favorite fighter's favorite fighter, and that's a fact. MMA legends like GSP, Rampage Jackson, BJ Penn, and many more have named Fedor as the greatest fighter of all time, and there's a good reason for that. This Russian monster went undefeated for nearly a decade with an astonishing 31-fight win streak before suffering his first loss at the hands of Fabricio Verdum in 2010. Remember how dominant Big Nog was? Fedor was the first to create the blueprint on how to defeat him by raining down ground and pound strikes while expertly avoiding submission attempts. During his reign, the last emperor won the Pride Heavyweight Championship by defeating Big Nog and remained the last Pride Heavyweight Champion. He also defeated the likes of Mirko Cro Cop, Andrei Orlovsky, Tim Silva, Mark Coleman, and Brett Rogers during his undefeated run. While injuries and age eventually took their toll, Fedor made a comeback and added more legendary victories to his resume, including wins over Frank Mir, Chael Sonnen, and Rampage Jackson. His younger brother, Alexander Emelianenko, was an enigmatic figure whose biggest adversary was alcohol. Despite having the potential to achieve as much as his older brother, Alexander's career was marred by controversies, including time spent in prison. Alexander holds a respectable MMA record of 29 victories and 9 losses, with notable wins over Gabriel Gonzaga and Sergei Kharitonov. Sadly, the two brothers are not on good terms, and it remains uncertain whether they will ever reconcile and bury the hatchet. And what's your favorite brotherly duo, fight fans? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more MMA content like this.